pictures of this game between the polar bear and the dog that started actually changing the relationship, changing the way they're thinking, changing the way they're interacting. And I think that we're all brought up with this type of DNA that maybe when we play, we do things differently, we interact differently, we think differently, and play has a lot of power. But what happens, as Brown, who studies play, wrote a very interesting book about play, and he has a very good TED Talk if you want to know what it says, that at some point in life, we get older, we're made to feel guilty, as you heard from the story, for laughing, for playing. We are told that it's unproductive, a waste of time, sinful, and it remains like very organized play. We either play with kids or we play sports or with rules, and we try to be productive the whole time. And actually the truth is, as he says, that in most cases play is a catalyst. It's beneficial to getting a little true play can spread through our lives and make us happier, more productive, and possibly what I want to say is more creative. Or what we're finding is more creative. And I want you to take just this short quote saying, a child in play acts as though he was a head taller than himself. So when we play, we change the way we think about our identity. I want to also introduce this concept here because it's a women's conference. To say that gender, there's very, very strong stereotypes and ideas about how women should act, how men should act, what are the roles of women and men, and how should we behave properly, and what are we expected to do. And one of the concepts I'm working with is gender play. So can we be more playful and try and play with the constructs of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man? And how can we actually change the ways we think about this? So play, play has been defined as a vacation from reality, purposeless activity, voluntary, intrinsic, and one of the best, actually, by Babis, one of my Greek colleagues, best definition by Babis Minimalis, is a place of threshold experience. It has a boundary in time and place usually. It has a relationship between uncertainty, freedom, and constraints. It's flexible between the means and the ends. We usually don't think about the outcome. When we're playing, we're thinking more about the process. And play usually has a positive affect, even though we might be fearful when we're playing because there's an enemy, but it's a positive affect overall. The threshold, I think, is the most interesting in the sense that it's a threshold between the inner self and the outside. And it's also a threshold experience between what is reality and what is non-reality, right? So when we're playing, we could really think reality is different from what it really is. So play is distinguished, as you can see, from work for different reasons, because a lot of times when we work, we think about the bottom line, we think about the outcome, we think about what actually is happening, whereas in play, we're thinking more about the process, about the enjoyment. We're really flowing. We're inside the experience of play. Another small part of this is the play spaces. So where do we feel safe enough to play when we're not with kids? Or how do we construct organizations or the places where we work in a way that we feel it's safe enough to play? So these are a great book about city, urban play, about kids playing, in different places in the cities. But how do we make these play spaces where people feel that it's allowed to play? So some organizations really try to do this. They construct the organization in a way, these are Google offices, different spaces that people work in a way that actually looks like a kindergarten sometimes. It makes people feel it's allowed. It's safe psychologically, it's safe physically to play in these areas, to be more creative. Usually if you look, it's organizations that do more creative work, right? It's organizations that are about ideas and creativity. Skip this for a minute. So one of the things that's most interesting about play is the identity play construct, which means that when we play, we don't only have to play with ideas and with things, but we also can be playful, as I said in the gender play, about who we are. So when we're at play, I could really think now that maybe I'm an Indian speaker. And what would that mean if I would be, and she said my name reminds her an Indian name, and I said I feel Indian sometimes. So the question would be how I would do my job if I'm Indian now. Would I give a different talk? How would I give the talk? This is identity play. And there's a lot of very interesting writings about the construct of identity play. I'll skip you to this. I call it I play, identity play versus I work. And a lot of good scholars in the field of organizational psychology and organizational behavior from INSEAD and from Harvard have written about, and myself have written about identity play. So when we work on our identity, we always work on our identity, which means how do we dress to the conference? What makeup do we put on? How do we stand? How will we talk? This is identity work, which means that we all the time preserve our identity. We look at consistency, stability. We think about what others would want us to do. We define our roles and ourselves, and we need external validation. But when we're at identity play, we could say, maybe I'm in an Indian conference, maybe I can wear pink today, okay? Which would not be consistent with my basic identity when I come as a speaker to conferences around the world, okay? Or when we're thinking about identity play, we're thinking about possible selves, about a lot of different future inconsistent possible selves. So this is a wonderful woman I met here before, which lives around the world, but maybe she's thinking of coming to Israel. So what type of identity will she have living in Israel? Or what type of identities she might have if she tries a different type of life than what we're trying now, or within our lives. So when we take ourselves or managers for these play workshops, or when we put ourselves in a play mindset when we're working, we can always also think about ourselves differently. We already have some lab studies showing that when people get into a role, we tell them, and they think about themselves differently, they're more creative at the task because they bring different ideas. They tap onto different knowledge. They think, what would I be thinking if I were Indian? What would I be wearing? So maybe I'll be wearing different things. So I have already more ideas. I have my ideas and Indian ideas within me, which means that I have a bigger pool of ideas to choose from. So this is the construct of identity play. So we were actually, I'll just share with you a very short study of ours done by Babis Minimalis, my wonderful Greek colleague, and Lynn Billion, a great, wonderful collaborator from Hong Kong and China. And we were interested together in trying to understand what happens when managers are perceived in big advertising firms that do a lot of creative work. What happens when the managers are perceived by their employees as being playful managers versus being serious or non-playful managers? And what we thought was that these managers, as I talked about the balance, about the Israeli chutzpah of what is, excuse me, they sort of have to balance between getting the work done and having creative ideas. And one thing we were interested in is the construct of creative deviance. Creative deviance is a type of creativity that employees are trying to develop something. They have a lot of ideas, and then the manager says, let's go with this idea. But they decide they're going to keep working on a different idea at the same time, which was banned, which they were told not to work on this idea. So it's deviant organizational behavior, like stealing, like taking organizational resources in the sense that people are using time and resources that they're not allowed to, but it is something that it can actually bring good to the organization because it can lead to creative outcomes. So we were interested, what would happen if the supervisors were perceived as playful? We thought that if they were perceived as playful, the employees would do more creative deviance and would be lower on compliance. So they would do less what they're told. On the other hand, we thought that later on in time, if they do more creative deviance, they will also show more creativity and more thriving. Whereas if they do more compliant behaviors, in time 3, they will be bored
and they will do mundane performance. They will do what they're told. They will have performance, but it's a different type of performance. So creative deviance, if you look at ideas of how can you make a sofa, for example, creative deviance refers to employees' violation of the manager's orders, as I said, and it's in the stage not of bringing up the ideas, but at the stage of deciding which ideas we should go with to the next step. So look at these. For example, these are wonderful prototypes of sofas, but so you bring up these ideas and the manager says, well, only one of them we can go forward with, but you believe that there's a different good idea. One of the best Israeli inventions, which I just talked to Ora, my colleague in the back, about, which is one of the best missile protecting mechanisms that Israel has invented, that is really saving a lot of lives now in Israel, was actually creative deviant behavior of one of the engineers or the team of engineers that were working on this, and were told to stop developing this specific mechanism and focus on another one, and they sort of made noises as if they were working on the other one, but were still believed in this and kept developing this idea, which came up to be one of Israel's best inventions. I also understood from organizational consultants that I work with that it's called in some of the firms black R&D. So there's this black R&D that people are doing research and development that's sort of gray or black when they're not really allowed to do this. So our thoughts were that when you're playful, the leaders are perceived as playful, employees will show more of this creative deviance. However, we were also interested in time, because today there's a lot of time pressure, and we thought that when there's time pressure, people would actually, this would harm the creative deviance and bring people to be more compliant. And last, as I said, we thought that when people will be compliant and will do what they're told, they won't be creative, but they will do their work. So performance will be fine, but won't be creative performance. And in terms of emotions, I really like the notion of energy and thriving. Harbin talked about it in her welcoming talk. There's a lot of research now about how people thrive and how much they're vital in their workspaces. And I love the construct of thriving, because thriving says when we thrive, we're high on vitality, which is positive emotions and high arousal, and we're high on learning. So the way the people thrive is when they feel they're learning, and then when they feel this positive arousal emotion. So our thoughts were that when people are doing creative deviance and they're breaking the rules and they're being more playful, they will thrive. They will feel they're learning something new. They will feel more vital about it because they're doing something crazy, and something that's like more things that we did as children and playful type of things. We also know this is highly related to a lot of health outcomes. When people are feeling they're thriving, they're learning, they're less ill, they're healthier, their well-being is better.